Hello all, welcome to Quantifiers. So welcome to the another session on odd one out. So how many of you believe that whenever you are seeing the questions on odd one out, you feel that you this question is making you a little odd for this paper or something, right? It's an extremely favorite topic of the CAT question setters. Like this topic was given a skip in the year 2022, and then again in the year 2023, it made a re-entry, right? So that is the case, and it has been a prominent topic since couple of years. The para summary, the para jumbles, and odd one out, right? So that was the case. So, but again, then it was like the skip for a 1 year only, and then again 2023 it made a re-entry. 2024 exams also in the verbal ability component there was a topic on odd one out, right? So, but an easy topic I would say in comparison to the para jumbles. So it falls into the category of the theta questions, just the way that you have para jumbles, the theta type where you have to type in the answer. So in case if there is the correct answer, like you're able to figure out the correct odd one out, you're gonna get +3 for it, right? But in case if you aren't able to come up with the correct answer, then you have nothing to lose much, because then the negatives will not be there. You'll be like getting the 0 marks for it as if you have not attempted this question, okay? But more doable and more accuracy focus in comparison to the para jumble. So this is, I would say that this is one topic of the verbal ability which every CAT aspirant should at least try solving it. Okay. So with this note, let's actually get into this topic of odd one out. Now, this is, I hope you all know, like you've been preparing for CAT and you are serious about your CAT exam. So you'll be given a few sentences. Generally, the CAT pattern is that they give you 5 sentences, and out of the 5 sentences, you need to pick up one sentence, and basically they're going to give you the space close to the sentences, and you need to type in the answer. So suppose out of the 5 sentences, you believe that the sentence number 4 is an odd one out, so you need to type the 4 as in, okay? The more the number of the sentences, maybe sometimes it can create a confusion also, and sometimes it can be an easy to figure out also, right? As of now, the trend is that the CAT is giving you 5 sentences, but it can also give you 4 sentences also. So you should hope for the best and prepare for the worst, right? So this is what the odd one out is. It's just like I'm talking about Amitabh Bachchan movie career, right? So all the sentences are talking about his blockbusters, his career in Bollywood, right? But there is a one sentence that started talking about Amitabh Bachchan is very tall, okay? So this is, we can see that this is an odd one out because the remaining sentences are talking about Amitabh Bachchan and his career in Bollywood, right? Whereas this gets to talk about his physical appearance. So this makes the sentence an odd one out. Of course, you're not going to get this kind of an easy odd one out in your paper, but exactly this is how the odd one questions looks like in your exams, right? So let's see some of the strategies basically to solve how to approach odd one out. So before I get into this, how to approach, just let me know how do you approach to odd one out questions. Like whenever I'm sure that you must have solved some previous year questions, you have been given some test series. So how do you go about this odd one out in case if someone wants to share? So how do you go about solving this odd one out? Anyone? Okay, let's discuss then. So what should be the approach when you solve the odd one out questions is that you should read all the statements first, okay? So it is not that once you have read the first statement only, so पहला statement पढ़ के ही मुझे idea लग जाएगा कि ये वाला odd one out है, okay? So this is not the case. So the first strategy whenever you get the odd one out questions is to go through and read all the sentences, okay? So read all the statements and identify what is the general theme that is binding it, okay? Sometimes what you can do is that suppose you got 5 sentences, then you can also label them, right? कि पहला sentence बात कर रहा है let's say अमिताभ बच्चन और उसका बॉलीवुड का, ओके, ये बात कर रहा है उसकी ब्लॉकबस्टर्स का, ओके, सो यू कैन राइट द की आइडिया ऑफ एवरी सेंटेंस, ओके, सो रीड ऑल द सेंटेंसेस एंड ट्राई टू लेबल देम मे बी कि ये सेंटेंस में क्या चीज की बात हो रही है, सेकेंड सेंटेंस क्या आइडिया को डिस्कस कर रहा है, थर्ड कौन से आइडिया को डिस्कस कर रहा है, so on and so forth, right? And then the case is that you identify the general theme or the common theme that is binding the majority of the sentences कि वन भी बात कर रहा है अमिताभ बच्चन इन बॉलीवुड, ये भी उसकी ब्लॉकबस्टर्स की बात कर रहा है, this is also talking about his flops in Bollywood, okay, it's also talking about how he rise to become this and the role of KBC and the other serials, okay, so maybe all of them are binding with a common idea, that is Amitabh Bachchan evolving career in Bollywood, right? Whether in the form of the cinemas or in form of a TV shows, right? So you find out, try and figure out that, okay? Try to keep, I mean, like, keep all the close by or all the related sentences in a bucket. Ki 1 and 2 ban gaya, 3 and 4 aayega, 5 nahi ho raha, so that means that it is an odd one out, right? So read all the statements. That should be the first of the strategy. Try and label each and every sentence with what could be the most important idea that is being discussed in the sentence, right? The second strategy is that you should search for links, right? Now, what are these links are your parajumbles links, right? The links of noun and pronoun, the links of thought extender, thought reversal, the links of cause and effect, problem and solution, example and idea, full form and short name, right? So these kinds of the links. So look for those links, look for mandatory pairs and try and figure out which sentence could be the introductory sentence. Now, all these things, that which sentence is an introductory sentence, what are the links, we have discussed in detail in our parajumble lecture, right? So in case if you want to go through all these things, you can take that particular lecture as the base for it, right? So search for links, search for the mandatory pairs, कि blocks कैसे बन सकते हैं, okay? So I mean like 2 and 3, 2 is talking about the noun and a 3 has he in it. So that is a pronoun, so 2 and 3 becomes a one block, right? Like similarly, 4 is talking about the problem and the 5th is actually giving you the solution. So 4 and 5th becomes a block or a pair, right? And the last is that the statement which does not fit the sequence or discontinues the idea or tone is the odd sentence. See, again we need to understand that there is not much hard and fast rules about the odd one out topic, right? ऐसा नहीं है that मैं आपको ये बोलूँ कि ये 1 rule, 2 rule, 3 rule है, you apply to your questions, आपका answer आ जाएगा, okay? Of course, it can be done by 2 techniques. The one is that how good you are able to understand the language, okay? The second is that are you able to connect logically to the statements that is given, right? So either the language trick or the logic tricks will going to work for an odd one out questions, okay? Of course, the language tips you can refer to the presentations or to the video on the parajumbles that we have already done couple of weeks ago, okay? And for the logic, of course, you need to the better and I mean like better that you're able to comprehend what is written in front of you, the better you'll be able to understand the logic between the statement. So as of now, this is not very hard and fast rule कि ये apply करके मेरा odd one out का आ जाएगा. So आपको language को भी अच्छे से समझना पड़ेगा that how the language is written, how the pairs are created, what could be the blocks, what could be the introductory sentence, okay? And what is a common theme? पहला में first sentence is talking about what idea, second में क्या बात हो रही है, third में क्या बात हो रही है, what is a common theme that is coming across all the sentences other than barring a one sentence which is actually your odd one out, okay? The second way is of course that sometimes you're gonna see that they're not visible language clues, okay? So that means that what you need to do is that you need to understand what is written and you need to go logically about it, right? Now, the one way is of course that you label the sentences, right? You label first किसकी बात कर रहा है, second किसकी बात कर रहा है, third किसकी, and so on, and see that is there a common theme that is coming across all the sentences, right? The second way of looking is that you resort to the tricks that you have learned in parajumbles, okay? That does not mean that I'm telling you कि आपको parajumble का sequence बनाना है, okay? So odd one out के question में you're not getting marks in case if you're able to come up with a correct sequence, okay? No, okay? But you should apply, I mean, like, you can apply the para-jumble tricks that you have learned to create the blocks and the pairs, okay? ये नहीं फर्क पड़ता कि 2 3 पहले आएगा और 4 5 बाद में आएगा, okay? As long as I'm able to figure out that the 1 is an odd one out and I'm able to understand कि 2 3 अपने आप में block है, okay? And 4 and 5 भी अपने आप में एक mandatory pair है, एक block है जो आएंगे ही आएंगे, okay? So that means अब ये किस भी order में है, 2 3 4 5 आए, 4 5 2 3 आए, it does not matter, okay? What matters is that I'm able to come up with the correct answer, which is an one is an odd one out. So the lender of the last resort, I would say, is definitely you use the para jumble tricks and tips that you have learned, right, and apply to the questions of odd one out, right? So these are some of the ways that you can actually solve the odd one out questions. Let's look at some of the elimination hacks for your odd sentence questions, okay? So the one elimination hack is that, I mean, like, how can you figure out that something is odd one out is the contrasting idea. So sometimes it happens that the remaining sentences, or let's say the majority of the sentences, are actually talking about terrorism in a negative manner, okay? Whereas there is a one sentence that is talking about terrorism in a positive manner. So that's a contrasting idea, na? Okay? So we're going to now the questions that we're going to practice abhi in a couple of minutes, right? You're going to understand कि एक में वो बोल रहा है that the particular person is not supporting it, okay? The another sentence is talking about that the particular person is supporting it. So we know that either of the one sentence will definitely be an odd one out because दोनों contrasting, very sharp and a direct contrast cannot come together, right? So any contrasting idea, so majority talking about terrorism in negative, one sentence talking about terrorism in positive is your odd one out, right? Similarly, there can be a different perspective, okay? Almost the same as a contrasting idea, right? But perspective alag hai. मैं इसको positive angle से देख रही हूँ. There is the another sentence that is looking in a different perspective, right? मैं इसको every time that the problem of dowry, I am including this dowry or I'm considering this dowry from a social and a cultural perspective, right? Whereas this particular sentence is actually considering the dowry from economical perspective, right? So there is a change in a perspective. Similarly, the change in a tone, okay? So now there was a one question. It wasn't the part of an odd one out, but I really like that question. It was a para completion जो CAT में बहुत time पहले आता था. So there, what the author has done is that it was about the kite runner के ऊपर था. So nowhere does the author was talking about kite. वो kite को कभी kite नहीं बोल रहा था. He was always metaphorically representing the kite as a bejeweled, okay, your aircraft, okay, war aircraft, something like this, right? So there was a case. So any other sentence that is talking about kite in a very simple language, because we can see that the tone that the author has used was a lot of, I mean, like a poetical form, a lot of metaphorically form, right? And in case if there is a one sentence that is just talking in a very simple manner, we know that that is an odd one out because it is not matching with the tone to the author, right? So again, I'm like, there were one of the sentence and one of the reading that I was actually reading where they say Sarkar with a capital S, okay, Aam Aadmi with capital A, right? And then in the another last sentence, it was saying that the government and people of India. So we know that this is not going with a sarcastic tone that the author was referring to the remaining sentences. So any change in tone will also calls out to be an odd one out, okay? Similarly, a subtle change in topic. So this was, I was talking when I was giving you the examples of Amitabh Bachchan कि वो सारे बात तो देखो, I mean, like odd one out, what makes odd one out tricky is that because every sentences are going to talk about the same topic, okay? सब में अमिताभ बच्चन होगा. Let's say अगर हम apple cultivation की बात कर रहे हैं तो सब में apple farming की बात हो रही होगी, okay? But there will be a subtle change in a topic, okay? Or I would say a subtle change in a theme. So odd one out is difficult because everything looks same, okay? Everything feels like as if they are the part of the same paragraph, okay? They're the part of the same passage, which is indeed the same part, right? So the question set is maybe, let's say, 4 majority of the sentences he picked up from the first paragraph, then the odd one out he picks up from the 5th paragraph, right? It looks blended because it is a part of the same passage after all, right? But then that is what you need to figure out. The keywords will look same, the subjects will look same, everything will look same, right? But there will be a subtle change in topic, and that subtle change in topic will going to make the sentence an odd one out. Okay, for example, Amitabh Bachchan, everything related to Bollywood. Okay, and then there is a one sentence which is saying that Amitabh Bachchan is 6 feet tall, which I don't know the real facts, right? So he's 6 feet tall, as a result of which he got a lot of Bollywood offers, right? So this is not talking about his acting. So this is anyhow related to the remaining sentences, because सारी sentences में बात किसकी हो रही है? अमिताभ बच्चन की, और बात किसकी हो रही है? बॉलीवुड इंडस्ट्री की. लेकिन उसके 6 feet tall, अब बॉलीवुड तो इसमें भी मेंशन है, ओके, but then it is more about his personality traits, right? So is that is a subtle change in a topic makes this sentence an odd one out, right? Similarly, any external element, right? Any external elements, I mean like दूसरे sentences बात कर रहे हैं एप्पल फार्मिंग की, ओके, एक सेंटेंस बात कर रहा है वो एप्पल फार्मिंग की भी बात करने लगे है, प्लस वो बात करने लगा है द जीनोटाइप्स ऑफ एप्पल्स, राइट? सो वी नो दैट वी आर नेचुरली, हम नेचुरल एप्पल फार्मिंग की बात कर रहे थे कि उसमें सॉइल कितना चाहिए, उसको मॉइस्चर मॉनिटर्स चाहिए, ये सब चाहिए, राइट? सो वी वर टॉकिंग अबाउट दिस. एक आ गया और वो बात करने लग गया that the genotype of apple can be produced. So we know that there is an external element that is being brought here, right? So genotype of an apple is not going with the majority of the theme which is related to apple farming, apple cultivation, right? So that is the case. The next is the scope. Now the scope of the sentences is that you need to feel कि broader scope में discuss हुए हैं या narrower scope में discuss हुए हैं, okay? कि क्या ये sentences, I mean like the majority of the sentences are talking about the broader problems, or are the majority of the sentences are talking about very specific issues, okay? And then there is a one sentence which is giving you a very broad outlook to it, right? So that means that that is an odd one out. So these are some of the tricks that you can actually use, but again understand that your understanding, that is your logics, okay, and how you're able to comprehend the sentences plus the language tricks will going to definitely help you master this topic of odd one out. So as of now, so it's all about perspective, yeah, right? So some of you will feel that it's 6, right? But the same sentence, the some of you will feel like 9, okay? And this perspective only you have to match it to the author's perspective, and then I'm sure that you'll be able to come up with the correct answers on odd one out. So any queries, any so far, any things that you want me to address before I move on to the questions for practice? Any idea that you want to discuss? Any other questions that you have related to odd one out? So, any queries, or are we good to get into the practice of the questions? Okay, then I think so. We are good to get to the questions for the practice. And with the questions, I think so, the things will become all the more clear, and you're going to see the practical applicability of all these ideas in the questions. So here's the first question. So I'll give you 2-3 minutes, which is ideally, I mean, like you cannot spend more than 3-4 minutes on the questions on the VARC. So that means that then in that case, you end up buying your time for your reading comprehension. So 2-3 minutes, and we're going to discuss this question. So I hope you have done this question. Shall we discuss? Or you need more time? So what's the answer to this question? Or are you still solving? Okay, so Samriddhi has given us the answer. Okay. What about others? I think so. I've given you good amount of time to read this question. So shall we discuss? Okay, Utkarsh. So as of now, I'm getting fourth and fifth as an answer. Let's see. Okay, let's discuss this question. So let's read it by the strategies that I have discussed so far. So we're going to read all the sentences in detail and we'll try to label them, right? So a typical example is Wikipedia. Now, from in case if you know the rules of the parajumbles, we know that this cannot be the starting sentence because it is talking about a typical example, right? So that means that this sentence has a dependency on other sentences, right? So a typical example is Wikipedia, where the overwhelming majority of contributors are male and so the available content is skewed to reflect their interest. Okay, so the first thing that I can get when I'm reading this sentence is that the author is not really happy with it, right? And there is some sort of male discrimination kind of a thing that is being reflected by this sentence, right? And so typical example Wikipedia hai where the overwhelming majority of the contributors are male. So this is talking about Wikipedia, okay? And let's say male being the major contributors, right? And then the content is skewed, okay? That is, it is not showing the true picture. कोई problem है content में because it is just presenting one gender into it, right? This is what I can figure out when I'm reading this sentence and when I'm labeling it, okay? Let's go to the second sentence now. Without diversity of thought and representation. Now we are getting and we can have a sigh of relief कि चलो समझ में आ रहा है चीजें जो लिखा है, right? So without diversity of thought and representation, society is left with a distorted picture of future options which are likely to result in augmenting existing inequalities, right? Now we can say if this was also talking about some sort of inequality, okay, and this sentence is also talking about some sort of inequality, and it is also saying without diversity of thought and representation. So somewhere we can see that the 1 and 2 are aligned to a common idea, right? Now gross gender inequality, again coming to the same thing in the technology sector, right? Wikipedia is a technology sector, right? So we are getting our signal words, we are getting our I mean, like you can say the echo words for that matter, right? So gross gender inequality in the technology sector is problematic, okay? So again going with the same tone. So as of now, 1, 2, 3 सारे एक tone की बात करें तो the author is not happy with the gender inequality, right? So the gross gender inequality in the technology sector is problematic not only for the industry-wide marginalizations of women, but because technology designs embody the value of their makers, okay? So it embody the values of their makers and it is skewed to reflect their interests. Again, we can see a lot of echo words and the signal words. Now, while redressing unequal representation in the workplace, now this is talking about a workplace, okay? Let's see here now. While redressing unequal representation in the workplace is a step in the right direction, right? So as of now जो 1, 2, 3 है वो किसकी बात कर रहे थे? वो तो इसकी बात कर रहे थे that there is a problem. जेंडर इनइक्वालिटी है, जेंडर इनइक्वालिटी है, जेंडर इनइक्वालिटी है, कंटेंट डिस्टॉर्ट हो रहा है because it is just representing one's ideas, okay, and ignoring the another gender's perspective. ये क्या बात कर रहा है? This is a positive sentence. ये tone positive हो गया ना? That while redressing unequal representation in the workplace is a step in the right direction, broader social changes is needed to address the structural inequalities embedded with the current organization of work and employment, right? So it looks like a more of a solution, right? Okay. Now let's see. If technology merely reflects the perspectives of the male stereotype, again what we have are the words technology, okay? That if technology merely reflects the perspectives of the male stereotype, then new technologies are unlikely to accommodate the diverse social context within which they operate, right? So one thing is clear from this is that majority of the sentences are talking about technology, okay? So almost यहाँ पे भी technology है, यहाँ पे भी technology है. The fifth is also talking about technology, right? Whereas we are left with the two, right? And the fourth, right? Now we can see that the second sentence is more in the tone to the rest of the remaining sentence. So second क्या बोल रहा है that without diversity of thoughts and representation, society is left with a distorted picture of future options, which are likely to result in augmenting existing inequalities. And in case if we read the sentence number 5, that if technology merely reflects the perspectives of the male stereotype, then new technologies are unlikely to accommodate the diverse social context within which they operate, right? So one thing is clear that one and your sentence number 3 and your sentence number 5, we beat in whatever logic, okay? हमें ये नहीं देखना है, हमें correct sequence नहीं बनाना है कि 5-1-3 आएगा 3-1-5 आएगा, but we know that they are talking about the similar idea and then they are talking about the technology sectors and the inequalities in the technology sector, right? Now, out of the 2 and a 4, we need to figure out which one is an odd one out. So, what do you now say? What is your answer? So, I can see here that some of you have mentioned 2 and some of you have mentioned 4. In fact, this is what the confusion is in the chat box also. So, which one will you go for now? The second is an odd one out or the fourth is an odd one out? Which sentence? Second or fourth as an odd one out? Which one will you go for? Fourth? Okay. Aditi is saying fourth. What about others? Okay. Let's see here now, right? So the first sentence is talking about a typical example is Wikipedia, where the overwhelming majority of contributors are male and so the available content is skewed to reflect their interest, right? So technology, Wikipedia, male hai or proper interest nahi aa raha hai, right? Now, without diversity of thought and representation, society is left with a distorted picture, okay? It is left with the distorted pictures of future options which are likely to result in augmenting existing inequality. So, it's also talking about key inequalities rahi, so will not be able to get a clear picture, but a distorted picture, right? Now, gross gender inequality in the technology sector is problematic not only for the industry-wide marginalization of women, but because technology designs embody the values of their makers, right? So we can see here that anyhow the 3 and 1 is a block, right? क्योंकि this looks like a very general sentence, okay? And a typical example uska kya hua? The typical example is a Wikipedia, right? Now let's read the C. If technology merely reflects the perspective of the male stereotype, then the new technologies are unlikely to accommodate the diverse social context within which they operate. And then without diversity of thoughts and representation, society is left with a distorted picture of future options which are likely. So again 3 and 1, and by that logic 2 and 5, they also becomes a block. And the correct answer to this question is odd one out is 4. Okay. Now what makes the sentence 4 is an odd one out is that it is talking about redressing unequal representation and they are talking about workplace. Okay. And it is more like giving a solution. Okay. Whereas the rest of the sentences are revolving around technology sector and inequalities, and in case if the inequalities are not being tackled up properly, okay, then that means that will not be able to reflect the true perspective, okay. And basically all the remaining sentences are talking about अगर हम male perspective से जाएंगे तो वो correct picture नहीं होगी, and this is more of redressal and there's more about the workplace issues. So that is the reason that the fourth is an odd one out. I hope you're able to get this question. So for those, yes, the one is an example of two. That's what I've said that the one is, I would say, one is an example of three. Okay, because gross gender inequality in the technology sector is problematic not only for the industry-wide marginalization of women, but because technology designs embody the value of their makers. So a typical example is Wikipedia, not the example of two for that matter. Is that clear? Did you get this question? Are we good to go on to the next question? So did you figure out why the fourth is an odd one out, right? So it is talking redressing unequal representation in the workplace is a step in the right direction, okay? Broader social changes needed. It is more giving you the solution, okay? Whereas the rest of the other sentences are not talking about the solution, they are actually talking about the problem. So a subtle change in a topic makes the sentence an odd one out. Try this question now. So I hope you are solving this question. So is it done? Or are you still doing? Okay, Aditi, let's wait for others. Okay, Samriddhi. Okay, what about others? Is it done? Shall we discuss? So what's your answer? Vedita, Pihu, Utkarsh, Sanskar? Okay, let's discuss this question. Then in that case, So let's again read each and every sentence in detail and try and figure out what is the theme of every sentence for that matter, in case if we are able to figure out, and then we'll look for the probable blocks here, right? Now, the care with which philosophers examine arguments for and against forms of biotechnology makes this an excellent primer on formulating and assessing moral arguments. Okay, so maybe with the first reading of the sentence, okay, I'm like, you'll not be very comfortable with the topic that is being discussed, but still, okay. And second, I would say is that they don't sit with this preconceived notion कि अगर कुछ philosopher लिखा हुआ है तो वो tricky होने वाला है, okay. Understand, stay with it. See, again, the philosophy will be the topic that will be blended in so many concepts and so many passages that you have to solve, right? So don't get scared because of the words like theology or philosophy, okay? Just try and understand it logically. So what is the first sentence is saying? That the care with which philosophers examine arguments. So philosophers, they are examining the arguments, and they are examining the argument for and against biotechnology, okay? And they are being given a lot of care about it, right? So this makes this an excellent primer on formulating and assessing moral arguments. कि moral arguments को assess करने के लिए this will going to act as a good primer, right? So this is about care and philosophers when they are basically examining arguments for and against biotechnology, something like this, right? Let's see and another sentences, and in case if we can create some blocks. Now, although most people find at least some form of genetic engineering disquieting. Disquieting is something we are not really happy with, right? It is not easy to articulate why, what is wrong with re-engineering our nature, okay? Now, this is completely getting into the different tangent. We don't know, right? The first sentence was talking about philosopher and they are examining the arguments with care, right? This is talking about that most people find at least some form of genetic engineering disquieting. It is not easy to articulate why and what is wrong with re-engineering our nature. So it is more about genetics and people not happy, okay, and maybe not happy with re-engineering our nature. And let's see, okay, is biology a part of genetics here? Okay, let's see. Let's keep it on a hold, right? Now, break those in breakthroughs in genetics present us with the promise that we will soon be able to prevent a host of debilitating diseases and the predicament that a newfound genetic knowledge may enable us to enhance our genetic traits. Okay, now this is talking about breakthroughs in genetics, right? So we can see that there is an echoing words. यहाँ पे भी genetics की बात थी, यहाँ पे भी genetics की बात थी. Let's see, okay. So, but this is talking about the breakthroughs in genetics will going to present us with a promise. So, it's something positive about it, right? So, it will going to promise that we will soon be able to prevent a host of debilitating diseases and the predicament that our newfound genetic knowledge may enable us to enhance our genetic traits. So, this is also talking about the positive that will be able to found the cause for this debilitating diseases, and it will also be a difficult situation that a newfound genetic knowledge may enable us to enhance our genetic traits. So both positive and negative that is being discussed here, right? Now, to grapple with the ethics of enhancement, we need to confront questions that verge on theology, which is why modern philosophers and political theorists tend to shrink from them. Okay. Now, what is tend to shrink from them? Anybody wants to try? So, tends to shrink from them. What is shrink from them? Anyone wants to try? What is shrinks from them? So shrinks from them is basically an avoid, right? Now let's see. This is talking about to grapple with the ethics of enhancement. We need to confront questions. Let's see. Okay. One argument is that the drive for human perfection through genetics is objectionable as it represents a bid for mastery that fails to appreciate the gifts of human powers and achievements. Okay. So now that we have read these sentences and everything looks complicated, just like the previous sentences where we were able to get the lot of links, probably for this question, we aren't able to find the one. Okay. Now, can you tell me that which is an obvious block? very easy and obvious block that you can figure out. कोई पेयर बन रहा है जो बहुत easy और obvious लग रहा है इस sentences में? So tricky odd one out, definitely it's a tricky odd one out, but then again, okay, so Aditi is saying that 3152 is a sequence. Okay, so okay, let's see here 3152. But can you see that the one pair and a one block which is very obvious is a block of 2 and 5? Okay, now why 2 and 5 is the block? Let's again understand. Although most people find at least some form of genetic engineering disquieting, okay, so they form some form of genetic engineering disquieting, it is not easy to articulate why. Okay, so author कह रहे हैं कि लोगों को genetic engineering they find it disquieting. Okay, that is a cause of worry, right? And they don't know, the author is saying why, what is wrong with re-engineering our nature. In case if we want to change our own nature, okay, genetically हमें अपना nature change करना है, so what is wrong with it? Okay, and the fifth is actually giving you the answer. So one argument is that, so what is wrong with re-engineering our nature? So one argument is that the drive for human perfection through genetics is objectionable as it represents a bid for mastery that fails to appreciate the gifts of human powers and achievements. कि हम अपना नेचर को अगर मॉडिफाई करेंगे और चेंज करेंगे, then we are going against something that is the gifts of human powers and achievements. Okay, I mean like that is the fails to appreciate the gifts of human powers and achievement. So that is the one argument. The one argument for the question that is being asked in fifth. Okay, so 2 and 5 makes a block, right? Now we need to understand that out of 1, 3 and 4, which one will go and which is an odd one out, right? Now the one thing that we can see here is that the majority of the sentences are basically talking about genetics. Now, breakthroughs in genetics present us with the promise that we will soon be able to prevent a host of debilitating diseases, and the predicament that our newfound genetic knowledge may enable us to enhance our genetic traits. Okay, so can we see that the 3 looks like more an opening sentence, a very general sentence? Okay, so it says that breakthroughs in genetics will present us with the promise that we will soon be able to prevent a host of debilitating diseases, and the predicament that our newfound genetic knowledge may enable us to enhance our genetic traits. So this is talking about enhancing our genetic traits. Okay, then we can say that most people find at least some form of genetic engineering disquieting. And what is wrong with re-engineering our nature? So re-engineering our nature enhance our genetic traits. Okay, and that one argument is that the drive for the human perfection through genetics is objectionable. Okay, as it represents a bid for mastery that fails to appreciate the gift of human powers and achievements. So we can see that 3, 2 and 5, they're all talking about re-engineering our nature, or we say enhancing our genetic traits. So their common theme that is coming across all the 3 sentences are enhancing our genetic traits maybe, okay, and the objections and the other things that are being said, right? Now that you're left with, so we know that 3 to 5 majority is talking about, and the majority's idea is about re-engineering our nature or modifying our genetic traits. That is a common theme, right? Now you're left with a first and a 4. Now out of the first and a 4, the 1 is out to be the odd one out, and the reason is that the little bit of the vocabulary definitely helps you. Okay, now what is the case is that in case if you give a very cursory look to the fourth and a one sentence, right, first sentence, you're going to understand that both of them are in the opposite directions. Okay, now why both of them are in the opposite direction is that the first is saying that the care with which philosophers examine, so this is talking about care with which philosophers examine biotechnology. He's happy. Okay, now whereas the fourth sentence is talking about to grapple with the ethics of enhancement, we need to confront questions that verge on theology. Theology is religion, which is why modern philosophers and political theorists tend to shrink from them. Okay, now shrink from them is that they want to avoid. Okay, so how can both the sentences be the part of the case same, where one where they are being very happy with the care, the another where they are shrinking from them, right? So any of the two has to be the part of it, and we can see here that which is more binding with the remaining of the sentences is the sentence number 4, because the sentence 4 is saying that to grapple with the ethics of enhancement. Okay, now what are the enhancement? to enhance our genetic traits. Okay, so enhance our genetic traits and enhancement. Okay, we need to confront questions that verge on theology कि हमें ऐसा करना चाहिए नहीं करना चाहिए. इसके लिए we need to find the answers in religion, which is why modern philosophers and political theorists, they tend to shrink away from them. Okay, whereas the correct answer to this question is option number one, which is an odd one out, which says that the care with which philosophers examine arguments for and against forms of biotechnology make this an excellent primer on formulating and assessing moral arguments. My sentence is not talking about it. Okay, my sentence is talking about enhancing our genetic traits and what are the problems, what are the debates. Okay, and political theorists and philosophers not happy with it, right? So that is the reason that first is an odd one out. So this was one of the trickiest question, I think so. This from the year 2021, I guess, right? 21 or 22. But then again, this was one of the question. So you can see here that there's no such, yes, it was indeed a very tricky question. So there's no such, I'm like very much practical, or you can say the rules that agar aap core theory लगा दोगे, वो theory लगा दोगे, तो you'll be able to solve the odd one out question. It's not possible. Okay, you need to understand the logic. Okay, you need to see what are the echoing words. So enhancement, enhance here, right? The you can see, let's say genetic traits, genetics here, right? So these are the case. This is talking about philosopher, this is talking about philosopher. So question setter to smart hai hi na yaar. Okay, he's gonna make all the sentences look very similar to each other. He's going to make all the keywords which are very, very similar to each other, right? But this is what you need to do. You need to understand the sentences. आपको keep the I'm like the blocks. So here we were saying that हमें 2 and 5 का block मिला, फिर 3 हमें इनसे connected लगा. So हमने उनको एक bucket में रख के छोड़ दिया ना कि 3 to 5 तो है. Now we are left with 1 and a 4, and then analyze more in detail, which is going more with the theme that is binding the majority of the sentences. So to grapple with the ethics of enhancement, what is this enhancement? कौन सा ethics of enhancement? That is to enhance our genetic traits. We need to confront questions that verge in theology, which is why modern philosophers, and this is where the trick was, this philosopher being happy and philosopher is shrinking away. Okay, I hope you are able to manage this question. Any doubts, any queries? Is it clear? Can we solve one more question, one or two more questions, right? Okay, try this question. Again, a very interesting question. Okay, Utkarsh, let's wait for others. Okay, Aditi. Okay, Pihu. So I think so. We shall discuss this question. So anybody who still needs time or doing this question, I can give you a minute or so. Okay. Aditi, what I generally suggest is that it is not necessary that you need to come up with a sequence. Okay. And in fact, I would say that coming up with a sequence probably will not be a good idea. Okay. Rather than what you should do is that you should create the blocks. कि ये दोनों same आ रहे हैं or look for a common theme that is binding it. Right. Because anyhow, para jumbles में भी तो accuracy problem है ही है. Right. So we cannot trust blindly on para jumble sequence when it comes to odd one out. Right, let's solve this question. So again, it's a tricky. So what I have we have thought of, I mean, like as an institute, ki easy questions, so everybody will be able to solve it, right? So let's keep some questions that are tricky where you can actually brainstorm and you can understand the topic in a detailed manner, okay, or in a better manner. So again, a cat question, and let's read the sentences with the same theory. We'll try to figure out, we'll try to label the sentences and figure out what is the theme that is coming across all the sentences. So having an appreciation for the workings of another person's mind is considered a prerequisite for natural language acquisition, strategic social interaction, reflexive thought, and moral judgment, right? So what is there? The first sentence is talking about that in case if you appreciate for the working of another person's mind, right? That is कि अगर आपको दूसरे बंदे का, I mean like दूसरे another person's, okay, mind, in case if you're able to I mean like you appreciate the workings of the another person's mind, that how does the another person works, okay, you appreciate that, so it is considered as a prerequisite for natural language acquisition. It's important because of language use से सीखोगे, you're going to learn the strategic social interaction, you're going to build up a reflexive thought and a moral judgment, right? So this is about I mean like appreciation for the another person's mind, working of another person's mind. Now, it is a theory of mind, okay? Though some scholars prefer to call it mentalizing or mind reading, which is important for the development of one's cognitive abilities, right? So this is talking about कि I mean like most probably ये जो इसकी बात हो रही है, ये इसी की theory का नाम की बात कर रही है. So maybe this is more talking about etymology, okay, or I would say the nomenclature. So the nomenclature की theory of mind को कुछ लोग mentalizing कहते हैं, कुछ लोग ये करते हैं. Is this the theory of mind? We need to read the remaining of the sentence, but this is talking about theory of mind, okay, and it is important for the development of one's cognitive abilities. One's मतलब खुद की cognitive abilities. Now, though we must speculate about its evolutionary origin, we don't know, it can be the theory of mind, whatever, okay, we do have indications that the capacity evolved sometime in last few million years, okay. Now this is talking about that the capacity evolved sometimes in the last few million years. Is the capacity equals to this theory of mind? As of now, we have read three sentences. We are still not clear which sentence is an odd one out, right? This capacity here, okay, we got the capacity here also, we got the capacity in the previous sentence also. This capacity develops from early beginnings in the first year of life to the adult's fast and often effortless understanding of others' thoughts, feelings, and intentions, okay. Understanding of others' thoughts, feelings, and intentions, working of another person's mind, okay, understanding of another person's mind. Can we see that a 1 and a 4, right? Are they, can we see the common theme still binding them? Okay, we don't know about the 2 and a 3 as of now, right? Now, one of the most fascinating human capacities, thank God we got this, right? Human capacity. So, human capacities may, one of the most fascinating human capacity is the ability to perceive and interpret other people behavior in terms of their mental states. Okay, now out of all the sentences, in case if I have to look for the opening sentence, I'm pretty sure that the fifth is an opening sentence. Okay, because first nahi ho sakta, second nahi ho sakta, third में भी it's है, fourth में भी this है. So the very general sentence is the fifth, right? That one of the most fascinating human capacities, मतलब human की capacities में सबसे ज्यादा fascinating human capacity क्या है? Is the ability to perceive and interpret other person's behavior in terms of their mental state. So this is also talking about understanding other person's behavior. This is also talking about understanding another person's mind. This is also talking about understanding other person's mind, right? So three of the sentences I can put them in a bucket easily, right? One is your five, okay, then is your four, and then is your one, okay, because there's a common theme that is binding all the sentences, and that is understanding another person's perspective. Now that we are left with two sentences, the one is the sentence number 3 and another is your sentence number 2. Okay, now let's see which one will go for it, right? Now we can see a couple of echo words in the three sentence. Now what is that couple echo word? Is the capacity. Okay, and we can see that the capacity was being discussed in fifth also, the capacity was being discussed in the fourth also. Okay, and 5 and 4 may what was the common theme is understanding another person's mind. Okay, and this was also talking about another understanding another person's mind, right? So though we must speculate about its evolutionary origin, right? So kab iska evolutionary origin hua, we don't know, right? We do have indications that the capacity evolved sometimes in the last few million years. So we can see that these are all talking about the capacity and the capacity of understanding another person's mind. Okay, so that makes the sentence number 2 as an odd one out, right? Now, why? See, again, understand the question setter. So, question setter has really played hard for this particular question, right? He has done a lot of heavy edits, right? I don't know. I'm not seeing the actual source, but of course, okay. In case it's not heavy edits also, but probably it's being picked up from the same passage. It looks like, okay, it's very close by, right? Now, what is the problem and what makes 2 is an odd one out is that it says it is a theory of mind, though some scholars prefer to call it mentalizing or mind reading, which is important for the development of one's cognitive abilities, right? So, first of all, this sentence is focusing more on nomenclature, okay? Nomenclature की इस theory को हम ये भी बोल सकते हैं, वो भी बोल सकते हैं, the etymology of theory. And secondly, the focus of the majority of the sentence was understanding the other person's mind, whereas this sentence is talking about development of one's cognitive abilities. Okay, we can see the other sentences is talking about others and this sentence is talking about one's. Okay, secondly, there's no nomenclature और इन सब की कोई बात नहीं हुई है, but this sentence is talking about nomenclature. And third is your faulty assumption, where you are saying that the capacity is actually equal to the theory. Okay, so calling the theory of mind is a capacity is actually the faulty assumptions that you were drawing it here. So this makes the sentence number 2 an odd one out, right? So I hope this is clear. So any queries with this question, right? So just to wrap up whatever we have done so far. So any queries before I just get into the summary part of the today's session? Did you get this? Did you learn something? I'm like from this session on an odd one out, I'm assuming that you've learned something. So the couple of the things that you need to keep into the consideration of the CAT VARC and especially the verbal ability section and the topics like odd one out. So definitely this is something which is doable. You should cash on this topic. Okay. Now why cash on this topic? Because Parajumbles is anyhow giving you a very vague kind of responses, and we don't know in case if the Parajumbles will be there this year. Okay, so it was a miss the last year, so we can keep our fingers crossed, right? So this is definitely an important topic from the verbal ability, doable provided you are able to understand the essence of the sentences. Okay, hard and fast, there are no particular rules that you need to do. Okay, there are certain that there could be a change in a subject, there could be a change in a theme, there could be a change in a tone, there can be a change in perspective, there can be a new idea that is being discussed, okay, subtle change in a theme. So these are some of the clues that can definitely help you, okay. The lender of the last resort, I would say, for the odd one out question is your para jumbles, okay. But again, I would say that that should be kept as the lender of the last resort, okay. So here for this particular question, I wasn't making any sort of the sequences, okay. But what I was doing is that I was creating the blocks, okay, कि ये इसका जा रहा है one of the most human capacities, okay. फिर ये कैपेसिटी यहाँ पे भी डिस्कस हुई है, and I was also simultaneously along with the language clues, okay, what I was doing is that I was also connecting to the theme, okay, कि ये भी इसकी बात कर रहा है, that is ability to understand other person's mind, इसमें भी understand other person's mind, इसमें भी understand other person's minds. The language clues that I was using is that यहाँ पे भी capacity है, this is also talking about the capacity, this is also talking about the capacity, right? So that is the case, right? So everything will go together to give you the answer to the odd one out, right? But what comes and what matters is definitely your practice. The more you practice, and one suggestion for the odd one out questions is that whenever you're not able to come up with a correct answer, don't get disheartened. Of course, verbal में तो आपको you have to motivate yourself constantly, right? Because it's not like a maths जहाँ पे 2 + 2 किया 4 आ गया, you got the answer and you know the results is visible in front of your eyes, okay. So that's a problematic scenario in the case of the verbal, because you're not sure of your answers, right? So keep yourself motivated whenever you're solving the questions on VARC. And secondly, the case is that don't, when the answer is not correct, right, आपको पता लग गया incorrect answer है, don't jump to the solutions, okay. Try and reattempt the question. So आपको ये पता चल गया कि two answer नहीं है, okay. I mean, like for a couple of you who said fourth is an answer, that's what was the case, right? Fourth आ रहा था बहुत ज्यादा, fourth is an odd one out. So you know now that the fourth is an odd one out है, I mean like odd one out नहीं है, it's a part of the paragraph. तो अगर ये part of the paragraph है, then which sentence will you going to pick up as an odd one out? So what I suggest is that rather than jumping to the solutions or the explanations, you should actually reattempt yourself, okay? Reattempt में आपको चीजें बहुत सारी clear हो जाएगी, okay? And don't blindly follow this technique कि मुझे सिर्फ para jumbles ही करके odd one out करना है. Mix of both the things, okay? So the two things will going to help you in the odd one out. One is coming across and looking for the common theme that is binding all the sentences, okay? क्या मोटा मोटा क्या idea discuss हो रहा है सारे sentences में, okay? Second is that can I make in those common themes जो मुझे लग रहा है कि common themes में, can I make a block or a pair? जैसे हमने पिछला question किया था, where the author is asking the question and then one argument is, so that was an answer to the question, so that becomes a block, right? So use all these techniques, but don't blindly, let's say, resort to creating a sequence of it, right? In case you are not able to come up with the correct sequence, you may end up missing on it, right? So दोनों को elements को simultaneously लेना है, the use of your pairs or the blocks, the creation of the blocks, looking for the echo and the signal words, okay? Plus you need to see for the logic and the theme that is going across all the major, and उनको segregate कर दो, okay? जैसे हमें पता चल गया that 5, 4 and 1, right? So ये बन गए, ये खत्म हो गए. Now that you're left with the two options, then closely examine those two sentences in context to the remaining sentence and look which is the sentence which is giving a more coherent paragraph in case if it is placed to the remaining of the sentences. So that's it all about for the odd one out. Hope you learned something from today's session, and see you next week soon with another concept on VARC. Meanwhile, happy learning and stay safe and study hard for your exams. All the best. Thank you, guys.